Oh, okay. So leave this one out. Okay, now that everyone is settled, Emma, can you move into the inner circle, please? Crouch, you also move in. I think we are settled, Wendy. You always give me the bad job. I become the ugly one.
I know, I always get to bad jobs too, don't worry about it. Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to you. It's a real pleasure to have you join us on a Saturday morning. I'm very glad to welcome all of you, and I'm going to go through to recognize those of you who come. So firstly, our acting CEO, Mr. Sorry, I get Mr. Tamini, and then our managing executive of Parks, Mr. McQuella, and managing executive of Conservation Services, Dr. Tamini. So a big welcome all the way down from up north last night, and being here with us today. Then I would also like to welcome our chiefs who joined us here today. Thank you very much. And I would ask you very briefly to introduce yourselves. Please just your name and who you represent.
We all represent the Korakupa tribe over here. This is Karibia Lady Van Dyke, the leader of the Korakupa. And I am Leland Tony. This is Karibia Lady Van Dyke, the leader of the Korakupa tribe. And we all belong to the Korakupa tribe here. And I am Bia Chedi, and the secretary of the Korakupa tribe. And then
I say good morning. Good morning. I do say I say what a fine day it is. I say kind says the Kuidi. I ask that every day from today remind us of the good old days. Only my strength that lies within who I really am. I speak for Tikwen. I'm speaking the first language of this place. And that is why I am here today. My name means the beginning of the leaves and the flowers. So I'm speaking now. Fast. Walked up many meetings for this day. Felt like I was going to be excluded. Here I am. Moment space revealing mystically, like the place's name. Say Tokai, where the clouds gather together mystically. This mystical moment make us all gather together here today. I do give thanks for your presence, for coming from far to near and near and far, and just to uphold the order of the day. Because if we don't have order, we'll become out of order. Best to have order so we can stay in the order. In Sentang say, who say that process play lot try see that process. Tidak ngau sa tadi play see that pusa. Go tie that to me okay. Say Father bless our outstep. But there we were, we are already safe. Also bless our instep, so that we can also be safe. Bless us to hear what we're supposed to hear. Bless and help us to say right words with our mouth. Bless us to do what we're supposed to do. Also bless us to do what we're not supposed to be doing. Bless us with a good death that we can also be inherited through the Mother Earth and the Father Sky. They are the true blessing unto us all. If God is love, so then let us all love. Blessed love with one perfect love. Ore, kare, akakare. Everybody is welcome.
I'm from Kaipun, things.
Madam, Solomon Square also need also presenting the whole people. Good morning. Good to see everybody. Not everybody not names and surnames, but we are here. With the real thing you can see. Everyone connect. My name is Lionel Peterson. I'm also from Ocean View. I'm over there. And I'm also knowing that everything is good according to what I speak. That we are know where we come from. Thank you. I got that.
Thank you very much. Next, I would very much like to welcome the conveners of our stakeholder working group. I'll let them introduce themselves as they come and give their presentations today. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for representing all of those who are sitting online at the moment. So a special welcome to our online folk. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Then I would like to welcome the SANParks team. Of course, our general manager for the Cape region and the parks is Norman Johnson. Norman. And of course, our park manager, Frans van Rooyen, who you all know. Then to the whole Table Mountain team, thank you, our rangers, our senior rangers, our park team, our comms team, our finance team, the Cape Research Centre scientists here and online. Nicola's managing the online meeting. Thanks, Nicola. And Lafisa, of course, you did so much in organising this meeting. Thank you. So really appreciate the team effort. Then I'd like to welcome our facilitator, Emma Villiers, who you'll be seeing more of later. And of course, you know, Howie and myself. Yeah, so welcome everybody. Haven't missed anybody? No. Thanks very much. Just a little bit of preparation for the meeting. Please keep your masks on, but of course, when you speak, then take them off. You know where the bathrooms are, just around the corner that way. And we'll take a short tea break at around about 11 o'clock. Yeah, and our online audience, if you wouldn't mind just giving us about 10 minutes where you yourself can go and have some tea or coffee, and then we'll be back after that. Right, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Howie to take us through the purpose of the meeting and the agenda for today.
Thank you. Thank you, Wayne. If we could maybe just move on to the first slide. I'd like to say that, you know, in the beginning, we were ambitious to think that we would complete this process in 6 months. I think we all, you know, were hyper, sort of, when the conveners suggested that, or introduced, in fact, indicated we're only going to have it in 6 months. The reality is that we are now 7 months down the line, and we haven't even completed phase 2. We're at the end of phase 2. So there's still a lot of work to be done. I think we are learning by doing. It's the same within SANParks. We don't know everything, but continuously evolve, learn, adapt through the process as we continue. So it shows on the screen, but it doesn't show on the screen. So we just want to make it really clear as to the purpose of today, and probably just as a reminder, we set off the first meeting, which was the 21st of May, what we want to achieve from this review process. So besides the fact that the actual, I'm trying to make time for you, but my words are all running.
The song will do.
The song will do. Yeah, but nevertheless, so we know that we have a current framework, and that framework specifically runs from 2005 till 2025. And there was supposed to be regular reviews after 5 years throughout the process. Now, admittedly, we've never actually followed that process. We never done our regular reviews as it was supposed to be. We were caught in between about fires, wildfires as well. And more recently, we were also affected by the COVID. So we've been able to muscle our way through this despite the challenges that we've experienced. But the reality is that it doesn't matter how you are afraid. The purpose of this review is to cast, is to project what the future holds for Tokai-Cecilia. As this process is only about Tokai-Cecilia, although we know that it does relate to the broader Table Mountain National Park. But we recognize that both this Table Mountain, the Tokai-Cecilia area, and then we have it. So the point is, we want to see we want to paint the future of the Tokai-Cecilia for whatever period it is. You know, I tend to not think the specific particular period, but rather to think what's the future, because the future holds no specific time frame. And the reality is that this review process is to engage with yourself, to engage with stakeholders, to get into a public space where anyone who believes that they have an interest or are affected by Tokai-Cecilia, that they be given a platform for a public stakeholder process to express their views, to express their concerns, to even express their desires and expectations of what they want for Tokai-Cecilia. So it's not just, for specific interest in affected people, it's also those that believe they have an interest. But it's also equally important for government departments, for those that sit in certain official positions who will also partake in the process. So we're creating a stakeholder and public engagement process where platform where all can participate. And I know that it was quite a struggle to get everyone that you believe to be involved in the process. But we always maintain that any particular individual groups can join the process and form part of this review process. And the whole idea is, look, it's very easy for me to stand here and say, we're all just one bunch of happy family. I mean, it's very naive to say that. But at least we are trying to find what are those realistic options, what are the best practices that you and stakeholders know that we could deploy in terms of the Tokai-Cecilia area. What are options? What are the available ways? What are the available methods that we can manage the Tokai-Cecilia area into the future that represent as best as possible interests of affected and interested parties, but also anyone else who lives in this area, who wants to enjoy, who wants to see certain things happening in Tokai-Cecilia. And the idea is then we call it working group proposals, etc. You can give any terminology for that, but it comes down to the fact that we want to know what are those proposals, what are your expectations that you want to consider for Table Mountain, for the Tokai-Cecilia area. So the purpose of the day is, as indicated in the process, that one, we obviously remember there was in the beginning, we call those people Pretoria. And we know today, I just need to, for my own, not making career statements, they are not executive, but for you, they could be the Pretoria people. To get them to this process so that we can get at least a showcase of their interests. Otherwise, it becomes the spy in the sky, we work our butts off, and then those Pretoria people go in a completely different direction. So we ask that in this review process that we let them come down and let them hear the proposals, the work that we've done all this past month. Let them hear those proposals. And to the point of get their view, get their response, so that also we read the body language. because it is important for us that are working very hard in this process, but also to get a response, some kind of engagement with them in terms of taking this process forward. So we obviously have them today to introduce them also to the process. We have been briefing them many months before and consistently throughout the process, but also there's a public display of having them here being part of that process. And then obviously we've worked around these 7 proposals and then to share with each other. Now remember, not all the stakeholders participated in the working group discussions. So not everyone knows and is aware of the content of those proposals. So today is the first public display of us showcasing the content of those proposals. So yes, we want to share the proposals so that everyone else, whether they participated in the workshops, whether they have attended some of our meetings, that at least that they are aware of the content of those proposals. So yes, we explain the process, but today we obviously want to showcase the interest of those Pretoria people, and then secondly, make sure that we share the work that we've done up to now through the proposals. So if there's a need to clarify certain things as well, we always, as conveners between Wendy and myself, always there to clarify. If there's any uncertainty, we're always there to clarify. So we might as well use that as the opportunity as well. So just in terms of the next slide. So in terms of the agenda for today, I just need to get the agenda on. So maybe we must have some of the Pretoria people managing the technology. So maybe the Thando must permanently move to this side. So I'm hoping that my colleagues have learned, how to do it. But essentially, this is the agenda for today. We've done our opening of welcome, we've done our introduction. So this agenda in itself doesn't come as a surprise, because we've discussed this in the different working groups. We've discussed it with the conveners as to what we want the format of today's meeting to be. So we will then have the present burning issues, and Emma will lead that to us. So these are the big questions that came up during the working group, and Emma will share those big questions with us. It's a collective of all different working groups, and then also we will then spend a significant amount of time on feedback on the proposals. We have the conveners who will then present the outcomes in their proposals, and in some cases we will then also have clarification required if there's a need, but more importantly, we will then allow those Pretoria people to just maybe probe or just ask questions for clarification. We will then give the convenient opportunity to respond to those.
Harry, sorry to interrupt you. Altered sound. So one of you might just put it from your mouth.
You should have told me that a bit earlier.
No, I'm discovering it now. Sorry.
Fantastic. Thanks, Emma. This is why we have Emma around as well. She can always just, hold us in the right place. So in reality, we will then, after spending about an hour and probably 1.5 hours on working group proposals, we will then ask the executives if there are any responses or if there are any questions that they want to pose. So remember, they are here and listen to us, but they can also, if there's a need to engage with the convener, there's also the possibility to ask questions around those. And then between Wendy and myself, we will then indicate towards the end of today, what is the process forward? What is the next 3 months going to look like? What is it that we foresee going to happen in the next 3 months? And we'll share that with you as well. And then obviously by 12:30, we will then close today's meeting. So that will be the discussion for today. And I will therefore hand over to Emma to just take us eloquently and the way she always does through this whole process around burning issues. And as I indicated, these are big items. You know, it's going to blow your mind. You know, Emma. So Emma, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks.
Can I just?
Sure.
Kingsley, I just see there that the burning questions is in 10 minutes, and you said it's a very big thing. I'm so to see how you can put such a big thing in 10 minutes.
That's why we have Emma. Emma will explain that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Howie. I wonder if we can get that other presentation up, Marla. Thank you. We decided to put the burning questions up front. There have been some very emotional issues. Oh, thanks. There have been some very emotional issues. There have been some deep questions and some really fundamental questions that have come up in the process, which are things that are beyond our kind of beyond the scope of what we can resolve as a group, and we need the support and assistance of the SANParks Executive, and they will presumably need the support of their board and potentially of their legal advisors to be able to answer some of these questions. So what we decided to do today was to say, let's acknowledge those questions. Let's acknowledge that there are big areas of dispute, that there are burning questions and burning issues. We're not going to be able to answer those questions today. We're not here to answer those questions today. Today, we're here to hear about all the extraordinary work that has been done by the working groups and represented today by the conveners. But we didn't want to pretend that the burning questions don't exist. The burning questions are there. The burning questions will be put to SANParks, and the SANParks Executive will have the really challenging task of figuring out how to answer them, but they won't have to do that today. And again, today we're dealing in the very broad strokes. We're dealing in summaries, which have been very difficult to create because there is so much detail and so much richness in every single one of the proposals. But really what today is about a meeting of stakeholders and SANParks. And so we felt it's very important to acknowledge the burning questions. We're not going to have time, unfortunately, to discuss them, but at least we know that we've put them into the minds of our executives. And we also know that we're taking them very seriously. And we know that there is a detailed process of engagement that will follow later on around the burning questions. Does that answer your question? Cool, thank you. So we've had some questions from each of the groups. I'm quite happy to just, oh, thank you. Dr. Diba, ladies and gentlemen, our technology experts.
The weekend job.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, so.
Oh, I need a raise.
Initially, it had been my thought that I would do this with one slide of burning questions, but of course that was a little bit naive. So what we've done is we've separated the questions that have come out of each of the working groups. I must tell you that in my request to the working groups, to the conveners to send questions, they sent detailed questions and very deeply thought through questions. And I had to go back to them and say, I'm sorry, but I need bullet points. And so thank you so much to the conveners for finding ways to really summarize your burning questions and to acknowledge that you know that there is going to be space and time to have a much more detailed conversation about this. So from biodiversity, we have, will SANParks compromise on their primary mandate of biodiversity conservation? And that takes us right to the heart of some of the really key questions that are being asked about the biodiversity needs and the needs of people, and how a park which has such an intimate interface with its community gets the balance right in terms of conservation and biodiversity and the needs, the recreational needs and the spiritual needs and the needs of the people around the park. From health and well-being, which started off as a recreation group and changed their name to health and well-being, they said what the mountain has to offer is so much more than just recreation. And so that's the health and well-being group. What commitment does SANParks have to honouring the founding intent of the Table Mountain National Park per the Fuggle report? You know, what is the status of the Fuggle report? To what extent are we going to be giving life to that? How does SANParks plan to address and remediate the original but broken promise of the inclusion of shaded landscapes, cultural and scenic, into the park? And there again, we see reference to the Fuggle report and to the park management plan. And how will any accepted proposals arising from the TCMF review process be funded? So these are some questions. Again, you're not going to be able to answer them today. They're in your minds, and I hope that you're starting to mull over them already. So if we can have the next slide. I feel a bit embarrassed about asking Dr. Diva to give me the next slide. Should be the other way around. So I'm presenting these questions in the order that the conveners will be presenting. So we'll have biodiversity first, then health and well-being, and then heritage. How sustainable will a new management framework plan be with regards to the preservation of cultural markers? And I invite anybody with an interest in history beyond the scope of this program to read the heritage proposal, which contains an extraordinarily rich amount of detail about cultural markers and the history of this space. So, Lauren, do you have a question?
It's from Teams. Seeing the songs.
Teams, they're not seeing the slides. I am explaining them in great detail.
We can hear you, but
They can hear, but they can't see. Okay, thanks. All right, so,
They can see them.
they can see him, but
oh, they can see me, but they can't see the slides. Oh, now they can see. Brilliant. Thank you, Lauren.
So standing in front of the camera.
yeah.
Am I? Where's the camera? Oh, I'm showing the camera. Whoopsie. Okay, so, sorry, we were still, I'm afraid to tell you that we jumped too fast, Dr. Diba. History is the first step towards the survey of markers to refute misinformation, and is it the main source of information for education and tourism? What will be done to ensure continued history research? So really to embed our thinking about the future of the TCMF, of Tokai-Cecilia, in our understanding of the history and the heritage. And Bata and her group have done an extraordinary job of research, and so we have a huge resource to draw on there. Will there be sufficient funds to sustain the management of heritage resources without selling out more recreational activities? In case of putting the core area out on tender, how will it affect the responsibility for heritage conservation? So, for example, at Lister, if we do intend to implement a tea shop there, how do we balance access to that space for family leisure with preservation and information, preservation of and information about history and historical and heritage markers? Thank you. It's very bad asking you to change the slide every time. From facilities, we have 3 burning questions. This one I have to say took a huge amount of summarization. So thank you very much, Stephen, for breaking it down for this. The park requires a balance between locked away biodiversity conservation with slipping funding and a valued and enjoyed playground for the city people and tourists. Where is the best balance point for responsibly low negative impact use of the park while building long-term broad community appreciation and support for conservation? That to me is a deeply principled question. And again, I wish the team luck that has to determine the answer to that. And I'm grateful that it's the SANParks team that will be doing that, because that is, of course, your core business. One day the Lower Tokai pine plantation will no longer be there. How best can we plan and prepare for this transition to deliver a respected new park section where people in Fynbos can live in safe and happy harmony? What needs to be in place before the trees are removed? And we had a long conversation about preparing communities, but also demonstrating that there are processes in place before the trees come down, which is something very important to what has historically been, in some cases, a very fractious relationship between the community of the park and the park. And we really believe that this process is a really big step forward in terms of rebuilding that trust, rebuilding a sense of shared value and mutual respect. And so I think that what Stephen's talking about here is really, or what Stephen's group is talking about, is really fundamental to ensuring that the community of the park understand what's coming, and that there is some preparation in advance. Park management will be easier and better when SANParks is in partnership with the local communities. What list of structures, actions, and sharing of information is required to achieve a step improvement in this relationship? And I think that we have started in that process. And so this question is also about how we continue with that. Thank you very much, Dr. Diba. I need one more, I think. Oh, that's it. Brilliant. Okay, I'm done. That's great. So we are handing over to our conveners to do their presentations, and Charmaine is going to start with biodiversity. Thank you very much, Howie. Get my bum up.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Charmaine Oxtoby. I'm from the City of Cape Town's Biodiversity Management Branch. He's a biophysical specialist. And I'm here today to represent the stakeholders from the biodiversity task team. We were an incredibly passionate, experienced, and dedicated group of stakeholders who collectively represent civil society, a number of public interest groups, ratepayers associations, tertiary institutions, the South African National Biodiversity Institute, the City of Cape Town as the municipality in which the park lies, SANParks honorary rangers, and the SANParks staff themselves. And we've come a long way as a group, and we've actually become very good friends. The connections that we've developed by open and honest discussion as a group has, for me, been incredibly heartwarming and valuable. And so we have two biodiversity guiding principles that came out of our proposal. The first and most important guiding principle is that people need biodiversity, not only for survival, because we rely on essential ecosystem services provided free of charge by nature, but also for recreation, stress reduction, general health and well-being, employment, income generating opportunities, and education. And most of us wake up, those of us who live in Cape Town, we wake up every morning and we see the mountain. It's a part of our everyday lives. It is important to all of us. And we need the mountain for our own well-being. Our second guiding principle is that SANParks' primary mandate and top priority is, in fact, biodiversity conservation, as you all know. And so our stakeholders' proposal is fully aligned to SANParks' primary mandate. Tokai-Cecilia are vitally important management sections of Table Mountain National Park for the conservation of a number of threatened ecosystems: Cape Flat Sand Fynbos, Peninsula Granite Fynbos, Peninsula Sandstone Fynbos, the natural forest that occurs on the mountain, and the associated wetlands and rivers. But I want to draw your attention to the incredible fact that all three fynbos vegetation types that occur in Cecilia and Tokai are listed nationally and internationally as critically endangered. That means that they will go extinct if we don't do something to protect them. They are also all endemic to Cape Town, which means they occur nowhere else on Earth. So it is our responsibility to look after them. But of those, Cape Flats Sand Fynbos is of the highest conservation priority. there is less than 10% of that entire vegetation type remaining. We cannot meet the national target. So we do need to focus on that as our highest priority. And so we have an overarching objective, which is to restore native terrestrial and aquatic biodiversity and the associated ecosystem processes and ecosystem services within Tokai-Cecilia specifically, by updating and implementing the appropriate restoration plans. These plans already exist. They just need to be revised and implemented. And this objective will address our management actions that are required today and as we transition from plantation forestry to a national park where the core mandate is biodiversity conservation, and then to carry those through into a revised park management plan going forward. And so I won't go into the details of our proposal. We've made very specific operational recommendations that can be implemented by the staff on the ground. But just to highlight the topics and actions that we've covered, we've broken it down into general biodiversity restoration, specific restoration for those critically endangered vegetation types or ecosystems, then wetlands and rivers, because we live in a water scarce city and water is really vital for the resilience of our city. Reinstating a natural fire regime, because that will keep everyone safe and keep the biodiversity happy. To get on top of the invasive alien plant control, which has been a huge issue on the mountain. Equally problematic is the erosion control. It hasn't been managed very well. And if we don't do something soon, literally our mountain is washing away. To, as part of all of that, facilitate faunal diversity recovery, controlling the invasive animals and promoting the indigenous pollinators and the whole ecosystem chain. And then looking to today and the future, adapting for climate change, looking at ways to mitigate climate change. And then last but not least, how to communicate the biodiversity message effectively within SANParks and also to our various stakeholders. And I want to assure you all, the actions that we've proposed can be implemented in the short term. Most of them are already in progress. They just need the commitment and the funding and the manpower and the drive to just keep at it. Restoration takes time. We accept that. They can also be implemented with the existing operational budget. And so we have provided a list of activities for SANParks to implement as we as a group feel is the way that, where the attention needs to be focused. And then we have recommended indicators to measure success of those actions.
Right, we got there.
So I'd like to leave you with a take-home message. Tokai-Cecilia are globally unique, both in their rich and threatened biodiversity and in their unique spatial position in the landscape. There are critically endangered vegetation types which need as much space as possible to remain resilient in the future. And we need to look after and uphold that unique connection between the lowlands, between the Cape Flats and the community who live around the park, and to the mountain, that connection from the lowlands to the mountain. Ecological restoration, which is implemented through appropriate fire regimes, alien clearing, erosion control, and faunal management, is possible. We have proof on the ground that it is possible and it is working. It just takes time. But it should also be prioritized for it to be effective. And ecological restoration is key to climate change mitigation by improving ecosystem services and increasing the resilience of the park, of our city, and of her people. So in conclusion, ecological restoration can restore hope, especially the hope that SANParks' vision of a park for all forever can be realized. And after all we've all been through in the last few years, we need hope. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
So we have 5 minutes for questions of clarity from our presenter and our executives. Can I give the microphone a... Oh, great. Any questions from you? From the 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Really, interesting and very detailed work, and I want to appreciate the depth of thinking and application into the critical ecological elements really around this and the vision that you're setting out particularly for biodiversity. A couple of questions. What do you see as an acceptable outcome for biodiversity conservation for the Cecilia Tokai area? Is it, a return to some state? And what does that state look like? Secondly, the presentation, one of the first principles you presented was that people need biodiversity. Is that correct? But then in the rest of the presentation, I'm missing people. How do you sort of reconcile that in the vision for biodiversity in this area? I think those are 2 questions that I asked.
May I answer 2? May I answer those first? Thank you, Lutando. Those are very interesting and useful questions. So the first, our vision for how the park should be restored is a landscape where we have zonation for different user groups and activities, high intensity, low intensity, core conservation, as you already have in your park management plan. Because there are different task teams, we have focused our proposal specifically on the biodiversity restoration. But we've made it very clear in our proposal that we don't expect the entire area to only be biodiversity conservation or mutually exclusive. We encourage use of the fynbos, of the whole park. It's an open access park and it needs to stay that way to be valued and appreciated by everyone.
2.5 minutes left for questions.
We do want there to be dedicated areas for other activities but we've left those proposals to the groups who are responsible for those mandates. We are not anti-shade or anti-trees. We are, the message we put forward in our proposal is, for example, the appropriate species of trees in the right place, managed appropriately. It's that pragmatic, inclusive approach to finding a balance and having nature restored the way it should be, so that we can have the best possible biodiversity conservation and people engagement using nature. Thank you.
Colleagues, and thank you very much for the presentation as well as the work that went into it. So we've got 3 questions for you. One is, how long in your timeline will it take to get to the desired outcome? And the second thing is that how much will it cost? People, resources, whatever it takes to get to the desired outcome. Number 3, do you have a scenario where if we have what it will look like when you have full funding, you have partial funding, or you have limited funding, so that at least we can play along with options? Thank you.
Thank you. So the first question about time. Restoration takes time. Fynbos, unlike the grasslands where you live in Pretoria, has a much longer fire cycle. We're talking 10 to 15 years between fires naturally. So because some species only set seed after fire, the restoration might take several fire cycles. But we know that, and we're happy to agree, to accept that. If you look at Lower Tokai, over time, it does look better. We just, looking at a longer term frame, probably within 30 years, realistically, for it to be a fully functioning ecosystem operating well. The cost, we feel that most of our proposed activities are reasonable within the existing operational budget. And we've spoken with SANParks and they agree with that. But I want to assure you that we're not leaving you alone. Our volunteers, our honorary rangers, we're committed. We will still be on the mountain hacking, pulling aliens, doing environmental education. We'll be there with you. And then the last question, just remind me. So
Costing options.
the costing options, yes. So I think that it sort of flows from my second one, that you can use citizen scientists and volunteer groups to help, but it needs to be guided by your operational budget and priorities. Thank you.
Thanks, colleagues, and good morning to all of you, and the here for placing us. We really appreciate your presence as well. I'll ask only one question because the colleagues have already asked most of the questions. You spoke about the balance, finding balance. What I want to test with you, what compromise are you prepared to accept in your proposal?
Thank you. I don't think we need a compromise. I don't think there is a compromise, because what we are proposing can keep everyone happy, I believe. There should be shaded walkways for people. There should be paths that are maintained for people to use for different activities. There should be forests with streams and frogs calling so that kids can muck around and enjoy. I don't see biodiversity as a compromise that could compromise people. I see the two working together and being a workable solution going forward that I genuinely hope we can achieve one day. Thank you.
Thank you, Charmaine.
Joella, good morning. How's it? My name's Gordon Chunnett, and I'm deeply indebted to my colleagues on the teams here. Some of their names are here. We met every week and sometimes more than once a week with various stakeholders in preparation of our deliberations. We all violently agreed throughout the process that despite fire being audaciously terrifying when it does happen, it is a tool. It's a tool available to SANParks and necessary in terms of, I'm standing in the wrong place, I should be standing here, so my apologies. Fire is a tool. It's available to SANParks in the regeneration, biodiversity that we live in. It's necessary. It's part of the ecosystem, and it has been for centuries, and that's why fynbos has evolved. It has evolved through fire. Periodic fires occur at frequencies of the order of 7 to 15 years apart. In the last few years, we've had a number of very terrifying fires. And I move on to showing some of the devastation of a recent fire that came through. That fire took out properties, took out assets, and created substantial damage. Damage to planting, damage to vineyards, damages to forests in the area, and in addition to it, it was terrifying. But it's a tool. Our team is of the opinion that fire is an important part of the ecosystem and needs to be correctly managed. A responsible approach will allow it to be used. Fire awareness, but most importantly, the communication around why fire is important, I think is the key message that I want to bring across. Communication, communication, and communication. Education of the public as to why fire is necessary, when fire is necessary, and how fire can be used to prevent wildfires. That's a significant part of what our team discussed. Fires don't wait for budgets. And their budgetary constraints at the moment, with helicopters not being able to fly right now because budgetary issues have not been concluded. To adequately manage fires, we need to maintain access. Not only access to the fire, but access away from the fire. When the fire is raging, you need to be able to get out, just as much as you need to be able to get in. Or is it not? Fires can be extremely terrifying if they're not managed. Or is it not? To implement, we need to implement a fire-safe interface between the park and its neighboring. That's a given. It's in the management plan. It's an important component, and it needs to be managed. It needs to be resourced in order to create a fire break that surrounds the park and creates an environment that can manage the encroachment of fire when it happens. To safeguard and identified heritage assets from fire, to implement prescribed burning to allow for biodiversity needs. We found out that the current prescribed burning is several years. We heard figures of up to 10 years behind what it should be. That needs to be caught up. We need to catch up on that, both from the biodiversity regeneration side of things, but also to reduce the fire load, which in places is extreme. Education and communication. I can't stress those two words more when it comes to fire. We need to educate the public, communities living near the park, and the public at large about the need for fire and how they can help when there is a fire. Budgetary issues need to be dealt with. And we need to be able to maintain the access. There, for example, a portion of a fire break with an excessive load here adjacent to it. We need to create a low fuel load interface with the urban areas. That's a given. That's in your management plan. There needs to be regular alien vegetation clearing and disposal of that material. Currently, there are volunteer groups that go on happy hacking, and they're encouraged. But the SANParks has an obligation to remove the material, either by burning or by removal, and that's not happening. One just has to look at Tokai, for example, where that's happening. Maintenance and review of required fire breaks. Prescribed burning, the biodiversity regeneration has been spoken to in the previous presentation and again is emphasized in our presentation. Fires don't wait for budgets. We discussed with the fire chief his requirements, and he showed us his list of vehicles, the most recent of which was a 2017 vehicle. His vehicles are aged. The helicopter availability at the moment is entirely restricted, and there were fires this past week. And there's a human resource issue which I believe is being dealt with. Fire preparedness and infrastructure and information needs to be communicated. It includes landowner responsibilities. Come on. You take the next one. Apologies for the stalling. Right, okay. A role player. Well, naturally, SANParks, but equally so the City of Cape Town, with whom SANParks has an excellent working relationship. From an executive point of view, that needs to be emphasized. I would love for you to meet with the mayor and his deputies who have charge of and can influence the ability of the city and its biodiversity department in the issuing of fire burning permits, such that those can be facilitated. And that I would hope to leave with you as a take home. There's the forestry group. There are various volunteer groups and people who are all part of the stakeholders. In summary, what we need to do, we need to have a fire safe interface between the park and its neighboring communities. Safeguarding of heritage assets, implement the prescribed burning, improve fire communication. It needs to be a widespread and diverse, getting into communities through a range of media, radio, newspapers, and public media. Effective resourcing and flexible budgets, and being prepared for fire through maintaining access, both for access to fire and away from fire. We submitted our documentation to Kirsten Bosch's BOTSOC, and they gave us a letter of support. They fully support the judicious use of fire in regeneration, but also in protecting communities. I thank you, and I make it open for questions. If we can go to the next one. There we go. Okay. Will.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions, gentlemen?
Thank you very much, Gordon, for that presentation. Very good overview again, and deep appreciation for the amount of work that has gone into it. I think my question is, which relates, I think, to one of the key points that you emphasize around awareness, education, communication. is to what extent, in your view, do you think the broader, citizens and stakeholders, of Table Mountain appreciate this valuable role of fire? The reason why I'm asking that question is that when there is these requests, for instance, to the city for permits to ban, these prescribed fires, it is actually the citizens and other stakeholders, whether it's business, for instance, own vineyards and other, businesses that are affected by fire, who actually object. And the question is, to what extent do we think that we can be able to get or to reach common ground around this value of fire, and what work do we need to do specifically in education? Have you identified target groups that we need to reach out to collectively, like in order to be able to ensure that we reach that common ground?
We believe that there are a number of areas there. First being schools. Take the message to schools. Take the message to the schools as to why we have a park within a city and that it's there for people to use. And that fire is a component of that use. And that through using fire, we will make areas relatively safe and regenerate the biodiversity. So we believe that schools is the starting point. Then community outreach programs, we believe, can be used. And then it's the general public. Cape Town is increasingly getting semigration of people coming from other parts of the country who didn't grow up knowing that fire was a component of the biodiversity needs of the city. They need to be taught that and told that and re-emphasized. And that's not just a once-off process. That has to be done frequently and regularly throughout the year, particularly as you approach burning seasons and where you want to create fire breaks. I, as a child, remember getting newspapers. My dad bought the newspaper each day, and there was always an advert there saying, we're going to be burning a fire break up on this section of the mountain between this and this period of time. And it was publicized as to why it was happening. It was on the radio. People were being interviewed. I believe there are media available to SANParks to get that message across. Yes, I understand that there always will be Mother Grundies, apologies for that term, who will object because their washing might be getting dust. Well, they can pick another day for the washing. The fire is important. And we believe that that message needs to be brought across. How it gets brought across, we can only suggest. Indeed. But it needs to be brought across and it needs to be emphasized. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for a very clear presentation. And that's where the state is working.
It is.
Okay. And really the work into it. I really don't have a specific question to say. I totally agree with the importance of the message that you're communicating. And I think there's a great space for us as an organization to work with you, in particularly on improving fire communication awareness and education. And we're really looking forward to working with you in terms of how that's doing as well. Thanks.
Mine, I think it's one question. Find the evidence. So what I want to check with you, or what I want to test with you, what is your view, or what approach do you use to deal with the incident fires and unplanned fires or illegal fires in this environment? Thank you.
If you're referring to wildfires, then I believe that there is capacity within the City of Cape Town and its stakeholders and the SANParks volunteer groups that working on fire, the fire volunteer groups. I believe that there is an excellent working relationship that has already been developed, and I believe that can be utilized. With regard to people making fire on the mountain, I think that there is an educational response there that can be used. For example, cultural groups and religious groups have been asking for the ability to go onto the mountain and to establish. Now, that's a two-way street. And I believe that and this is my belief, the team discussed it at length, and although we didn't come to any firm agreement on it, this is what I believe, is that where we can encourage those cultural and religious groups to go to designated areas where there is fire prevention facilities, like, for example, the Braai areas in the Newlands Forest, where they have got fire prevention facilities there. And that if they have to, an arrangement can be made to accommodate those kinds of facilities. This was discussed at some length prior to this phase of the program coming in 3 months ago in the previous forum groups, and I think that there can be some measure of compromise, that's my opinion, that can be found. Random fire making is problematic. And as we saw 2 nights ago on Muizenberg Mountain, the mountain was ablaze again by random fire making, probably people burning copper wire. We don't know. But again, the city had to respond, and there was no helicopter support for it. Any other questions?
No, we don't have time for any other questions.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this morning, for the opportunity to finally bring the Tokai-Cecilia management framework into a public participation process in which we can all take part in one way or another. And I know I have a very angry group sitting in the background asking why they weren't here today. One of the things that I want to state from the outset, and sorry, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Nikki Schmidt. I'm the chairperson of Parkscape. I'm the environmental representative for the ward of Ward 71 for the City of Cape Town. And I've had the pleasure of being the convener for the Health and Wellbeing Group. To bring myself back to where I left off, I want to start off by saying that from the outset, this process has been flawed, and it regrettably remains flawed. And for you, my colleagues across the table, whom I've had the pleasure to engage with previously, for you, a lot of this is about brand and brand value and stakeholder relationships. And what you have in the Tokai-Cecilia management framework is the opportunity to build brand, to improve your stakeholder relationships, to bring the people of Cape Town with you on a journey to revert to the original holistic vision of the founding intent of this park. This park is a microcosm, this Tokai-Cecilia area is a microcosm of the macrocosm. If you get this right, you solve a lot of the problems of this park per se. You build your brand some more. You bring the people of Cape Town with you. I think the important thing to remember is that this park, these mountains, they are the temple of the people of Cape Town. And when you mess with people's temple, you mess with people and they become angry. So what I bring to this table is the voice of the people. I speak for the people who want to be part of this park, who have a deep connection to this park. Our group was 22 people, very, very diverse group. First Nations people, hikers, families, residents, ratepayers, communities, mountain bikers, horse riders, dog walkers, mushroom pickers, every single one of those people comes into this park, our park, your park, to seek respite, to seek sanctuary in nature, in healthy ecosystems, and in diverse landscapes, because that is the unique capeness of this park, an urban park, an urban national park, a park that has people in it and around it all the time. I'm not going to talk to biodiversity. Charmaine has done a brilliant job of that. What we look for is to create the balance, to find the human need within this park, to allow people to find physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual experiences which lies within their hearts and within their connection to these mountains. When we can get people into nature, we create healthy people. We create healthy communities. We build a healthy country. When you have people on your side, they will champion you and they will champion this park. These are the people who I would like to pay tribute to as part of who was part of this. They were the most remarkable group of people I have ever had the pleasure of working with. The goodwill, the good humor, the insight, the intelligence, the humanity was profound. And I am very glad and I'm thankful to you for offering me the opportunity to make new friends. Our group has represented from the outset the concept of humanity. Tokai-Cecilia, I'm sure King can pronounce that better for me. Ubuntu. We bring with us the desire to heal and to build nation. That is the opportunity we see in this park. We see it through the restoration of the original holistic vision for the park as per the Fugal report. And that includes not only biodiversity, but cultural, scenic, shaded, and biodiverse landscapes. Healthy ecosystems that benefit people, flora, and fauna, where we celebrate the deep connection that people have to the park, their temple. And we celebrate the unique capeness of this Constantia Valley that lies within the arms of Tokai-Cecilia. And we recognize the interfaces between humanity, climate change, and communities. Our objectives are to create shade spaces, urban trees, urban forests that help mitigate climate change and provide community benefits. We understand that people need multiple environments, diverse environments, not a single kind of environment. We want to see the nurture of cultural heritage that is being neglected and forgotten for generations by a people who have been disenfranchised. We want to celebrate our cultural linkages and build partnerships with which we can go forward in creating these dreams. Public and private partnerships, community public and private partnerships, corporate partnerships. We can manage concessionaires and find ways to build ecotourism to enhance visitor experiences. And again, we build better stakeholder relationships, park relationships, we create better sustainability, we build your brand some more. The details of the proposal of this group is profound. There are 412 pages in our proposal.
I can vouch for that.
Emma could absolutely vouch for that. The number of man hours, hundreds and hundreds of man hours went into producing this. So I'm not going to give you the details. I'm going to give you broad brush strokes, but our vision includes the manor house, the arboretum, the picnic site, lower Tokai-Cecilia, upper Tokai, the retention and of existing trails, the creation of new trails to avoid user conflict, the retention of existing cultural landscapes. We cannot escape the fact that in the last 16 years, we have lost landscapes that should never be lost. We want to see those tracks and trails maintained so that mountain bikers and horse riders don't have to bump heads and horses run down the mountain and mountain bikers are left cursing. We want to create areas for worship and for ritual and for healing. We want to recognize, honor, and respect all groups. And again, in doing that, improve your brand value. We want to build better stakeholder and park relationships. We want to create accessibility for all. We want to ensure safety for all. We want to create safe spaces for education, for outreach, for upliftment, for recreation, for community development, for remembrance, for healing, for people. And we believe it is possible to do this. Having looked at all the presentations, there are multiple synergies through which we can create a shared vision that benefits all. I thank you. Kaigan guys. Of course.
Gordon heard a helicopter and immediately went running outside. Get access to it. Fire prevention.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nikki. Again, very well through, and I don't know if I can say I can't wait to read 400 pages, but I'm looking forward to seeing the detail in the report. When you started with the point about process, and I think that can be a longer debate, and so I'm going to skip that and maybe focus on the content of the presentation, and maybe later on, if the conveners allow, we can reflect on your thoughts about, the issues that you think we can look at with regards to the process. In the presentation, you speak about shade, for instance, as one. We know that in parts of the Cecilia Tokai area, that shade is actually currently invasive alien plants. Do you have visions of either that remaining or of indigenous trees replacing that as part of some of the proposals with regards to how shade might be provided in the future, in the longer term, considering some of the risks, for instance, with especially to fire with some of the invasive alien plants? I think we will come back at some point and share, but we recently did 3 very detailed assessments of cultural heritage across 3 national parks, and we're continuing to do that across all of national parks, because you really can't manage what you can measure. We hope that we can actually share the report around the cultural heritage assessment for Table Mountain National Park, and perhaps get inputs from some of the stakeholder groups, including the indigenous peoples who live in and around the mountain. I think that it would be good to reflect on that and the vision for management of that. And as Dumisane, wearing his sort of CEO ahead, the cost of that. Then the last question, and maybe it's not a question we can answer, what is the alignment between some of these actions that you're expressing here and what perhaps is already contained in the park management plan? Are there overlaps? Are you presenting additional visions and actions for how that needs to find expression in the park or in the management of the park? And the vision seems to be broader than Tokai-Cecilia. Am I reading that correctly? Those are some of the questions that I have, and I don't know which one you want to pick.
Okay, so before we move on to any more questions, you have to tap on some of those for me. let me just start with the shade issue. Personally, I would like to see a transition to indigenous species or local species rather, because we can't so call them indigenous because Charmaine will tell me that the indigenous tree species are in the ravines, but local species. I would like to see that because I think it gives us a greater richness of biodiversity. However, I can also very safely tell you that we ran a survey in the Lower Tokai area earlier this year. And of the 579 people that we interviewed completely randomly, the majority would like to see the plantations remain. So how one resolves that is a different matter, because I can tell you that the people who use Lower Tokai and the people who use Cecilia would like to see what is there today. Personally, I would like to see a transition, but that's me speaking for myself and not the greater community. So that's the answer to that question. In terms of the cultural heritage, I do think that it speaks more broadly to the park per se. And I think that if you look at the Tokai-Cecilia area, what you see is an area of incredible cultural richness. It's what one of my colleagues calls cakes within this particular valley. And this particular valley it's got a history of colonialism, of slavery, of forestry, of vineyards. All of that is what makes the Tokai-Cecilia area. And that is a cultural landscape in and of itself. And what has happened to that cultural landscape is it's seeing destruction. And that is a problem. People have lost something that they have held dear. And a large part of that loss has been in pursuit of a biodiversity conservation agenda. And that's a question that has to be asked and answered in a far broader context. And as for the broader situation of the park per se, I think that this vision is something that can be extended into the rest of the park. I think that's the value of it. That comes back to my point about Tokai-Cecilia being a microcosm of the macrocosm. If you look at what we do here, if you look at the kind of proposals that come out of this, if we get this right, these are models that you can apply in other buffer zones. You can apply it to the Deer Park and Rivik Park area. And I think that's where the value lies. Use it as a testing ground. See what you can get right here, and then see if you can take it out into the broader area.
We all time up for questions unless you do have a burning question.
No, I didn't. But I'd love to.
Oh, come on.
I think we appreciate the presentation, and I like most of the points which you mentioned, but there's one point you said if you get this right, then you win. But my position is that if we get this right, because if you put the responsibility on one person, on one party, I don't think anything achieved. But maybe a big one. What is the end game for this? I think you mentioned it in the presentation, but I want to get it from you, and maybe extend my thanks as well for the hours we put with your team in this work. Thank you.
So it's absolutely about a we. I think we all accept that. I don't think it's us looking to SANParks to say, you've got to do it. I think the synergies are a we. I think that in itself says it's a we thing. And if you make the first steps, if you start to rebuild the respect and you start to honor people, it will flow naturally from that. If you maintain the position that we've seen for the past 16 years, then it's not going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Oh, is there another question? I'm sorry. Apologies. If I can ask you to keep the question and answer a little bit short, I'd be grateful because we are running severely over time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm a people's person. I speak here with deep concern. I think I did. It's missed by me and many other people in the compliance, special development units. And the crawling up of the urban area, moving into the mountain, which is a city responsibility. And secondly, and this is a national question that I want to ask, is that how do we address the continuous overpopulation in the city? There's a rapid explosion of a population that the city cannot accommodate. And we, coming from the Cape Flats, are sitting in a situation where our people are dying continuously without being looked upon. And once you are lacking here in the city, and I was a councillor in the city in 1995, 1996 and 2000. And what is missing here is that the healing cannot take place while our people are dying in the Cape Flats and being starved to get into the inner city because of the city making it impossible to develop integration pattern of the people that cannot afford to stay in these areas. And therefore, I say again that the spatial planning must be compliant, but people must be compliant with our cultural needs to protect the indigenous people who have suffered for 369 years in this country, continues to suffer. Our cultural spaces in those mountains. We live in the wild, but we are looked upon that we are ignorant. Remember this place when we play. Wow. I just want to make one quote what the chief said. He said, when the time comes, when there is no more animals to kill, when there are no more fish in the sea, there are no more working force to kill the earth, you can't eat money. Thank you.
If there is anybody in this who's in a position to answer such a deep and powerful and important question about the needs of vulnerable people in the city and what their relationship is with the market. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm not going to ask you to answer that as a question. I think we'll move on to, are we having a break or are we moving on to the next registration?
Let's do one more and then have a break.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
It's a rescue helicopter float below Elephant's Eye.
I was wondering if it was to have sort of a display of might. Yes, we do have helicopters.
Just remember the camera's there.
Okay. Maybe position there. There. Yeah.
Over here. Okay, now I can see.
Yeah.
You can take your mask off as well.
And I'm going to take my mask off.
as part of the program, so you can excuse me for that. But and to our dear friends from Victoria, Mr. Dlamini, Mr. Mufina, and Dr. Ziba. Is that correct? Yes. Is that Mr. McQueenie?
Not Mr.
So yeah, very nice to meet you. And it's a cold day here, but I hope you enjoy the day. And in case you would like to go and walk with the Arboretum, I'll take you. Okay. My presentation is very short because history is very wide. If I'm going to stand here and talk history, then I'm going to take tomorrow morning, and they don't have prepared breakfast for us. It's a small group, very small group. It's myself, Bertha van Rooyen. I have a PhD on the history of the Tokai-Cecilia, so it helps a lot to get background information and so forth. But that's not the point here. We are a very great group. I have the Muslim community there, and we figured out a couple of problems with the Muslim sites. It's a burial site on Tokai or on Buitenverwachting. It seems it's outside the border of Tokai, of the Tokai Park. So yeah, but those people with them from Mr. Brown, the Rastafarian group, just over 100 years history in South Africa, and then other people. Paddy Atwell was for a section with us. Mike Hyde, hardworking volunteer and very interested in local history. Mike Golby, he joined several groups and is absolute a value to any group. And then a lady from England, she's living now 19 years in the country and she wants to learn everything about the country. Philippa, she's part of our group. And then our two Muslim groups are Ibrahim, Manuel and Muhammad Samasi, and then one or two other people online that I don't know. I've just communicated with them, or not, they didn't communicate back, just with them emails. So yes, that was the whole group. I hope I didn't skip anybody. Oh, my husband. At least for 3 months, or no, it was 4 months. Every morning, every afternoon, every night, we had history for lunch, for supper. So yeah, okay. So I'm going to keep this very short. We looked at the TCMF program of 2009, and we picked up several misrepresentations in there that have to be corrected. And then also from my study, we can now add hidden aspects behind the guys. Cecilia wanted to open it up to the group. Okay, to contribute to the identification of cultural heritage markers, that is very obvious. To evaluate and address heritage issues raised by stakeholders in 2021 and weigh them up against the history of the Tokai-Cecilia. Here I want to mention 2 examples. The one example is, but before let me just say this: we are working in the parameters of a protected area, so that means we cannot go outside this area. But according to that, the guy apparently has something to do with shipwrecks. I mean, that is a little bit impossible. We can't touch the sea. So it's that type of thing that we just want to bring, and not hanging on the Great Bell or whatsoever. We just want to correct that. The other one is that corrugated iron plates for roofs were only developed in the 1830s. And all of a sudden, we've got a building here in the main core area that was erected in the Dutch-English War of 1795. So you can see it's that type of correction that need to be made. We have to weigh things up, you know, so that's just important that we need to be corrected. Because what has happened in the past is people assume that something was built then. They forward the information to Heritage Western Cape, and those things got declared as heritage markers. But the dates were wrong. The dates of the buildings were wrong. And that can affect the heritage of a building. For example, the field office was built in 1899. It has seen a couple of reparations and so forth, but it makes it a very important heritage site or structure because it was one of the first prototypes, not the first necessarily. It got the number as Forestry House #1. It's not necessarily the first one. It seems to be that there were two other places built before that. But that is now, if that is registered as being built in 1937 or, I'm sorry, I might have the date wrong, but the wrong date. And the grading of the building is, to my mind, a little bit lower, it should have been higher. So it's that type of concern that I have about grading. Another problem that I want to lift out there is the fire bystand house at present also in the core area. That, according to old pictures, it seems that that house was the classroom of the forestry school, starting here. Now, okay, I'll carry up. But anyway, so
It's fascinating, Bianca, but it's just that we can't have all. Don't forget the broad strokes, please.
Okay.
It is fascinating.
Okay. Then I've talked about the parameters. When I said the parameters, with that we investigated several action department directives. Can you please move on to our action? Actions to remedy shortcomings in current and newly identified conflict markers. To establish a seated governmental support school teaching the conservation of nature and culture. That's a very important point there that I want to raise. You all know what the seated schools are. We live in an area, it's now mentioned here, that we have a poverty problem. We have joblessness in South Africa, especially here in Cape Town. And this is an ideal opportunity that can be taken. The buildings are here. It is a central place. It gives you nature conservation. We've seen the need in biodiversity and a lot of culture also. So, and maintenance for not even SANParks, but the students can go out and get jobs where they can do maintenance in other conservation areas. So it is something to consider. And then with that comes the, now the promotion of public education, tourism and inclusivity by maintaining presence at the heritage sites. That's very important. I've seen so often when there's not guidance at the Arboretum, sometimes when we work there, people are coming there and they start asking questions, or we approach them, can we help you? Can we help you? And every time it pays off. And then the last point is something for more locally, but we need SANParks in regards to that, to establish and promote a specialized SANParks supported heritage volunteer group. History has to be researched, it has to be preserved. And if we don't look into that, if we don't support that matter, we're going to leave the foundation because all surveys need history as a foundation. And thank you.
Sorry for rushing you, but I did say earlier that I really recommend that everybody reads your proposal. It is fascinating. So we go for an opportunity to the big wigs to ask you some questions.
Corrections. One, we are not from Pretoria. Two, we are not negatives. We just, part of the community. I think one must appreciate Kaibai's introduction. I think it was a timely introduction to your presentation, and I want to request that quotation at the end there, because I think it's a very powerful statement of our interrelationship with nature. That we derive our existence from nature. I want to appreciate the presentation and the rich history. We have a team working on cultural heritage, and I want to take up the proposal around establishing a SANParks sponsored volunteer group, and we will ask Mr. Homo, who heads up the cultural heritage group, that when the process has concluded, to look at some of these proposals and opportunities for community-wide participation, especially around cultural heritage management, because that's an area that is at its infancy in terms of management in SANParks compared, for instance, to our management of biodiversity, for which we are known. And I think that's something that we are building strong foundations for, and we think that it's something that is part of the future, not just of the Cecilia Tokai area of Table Mountain, but of the whole SANParks and conservation in general, because we must recognize, this, strong interdependent relationship between people and nature. I mean, if you look at the vision, 2050 vision for the Convention on Biological Diversity, it's basically living in harmony with nature, and it's basically a recognition of the need for a deal between people and nature. So I think we need to give expression to that. That's just a comment.
You like that comment needs a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peter, for the presentation. And that's really welcome the groundwork that has been done in this particular area. I mean, very good action plan, and I must say that, I really doubt that anyone will really disagree with this being proposed, particularly your point number 4. That's a very brilliant idea, which I think we must look at it as really a seed idea that can be taken and expanded all the way to all our national parks, all the way to Mali, which is on the borders of Botswana and other countries. So the point is that, if the diversity of what Sabokomo, who's heading on heritage, cultural and heritage development, we are saying like we do. And I think when you meet and start really mulling over this, ignition of quite a big fire. So we're really looking forward to really unpacking this and see what really comes out of it. Thank you very much.
Is it time for us to have a short break? 10 minutes. So it's £25. Back in the room at 25:02. Thank you very much. Okay.
No, no, for this.
Not a really nice food. Like we never did that see it today.
Just the visual conditions. He's amazing. Yeah, he is. Okay.
It sounds good.
4 weeks. It's been closed for 4 years. And I'm sorry, you want opportunities, there's a shaded, preserved heritage place waiting to be used. Nobody feels welcome. Could we have the next slide? Okay, just to introduce my team, or our team, let's see the next picture.
We have a very, there we go.
All right, so there are 7 of us. Kingsley you've met, Nikki you've met, France you've met, and then there's Dion over there. He's the guy who's responsible for all the cycling. Today we've got 400 people on the mountainside. Dion has done that with his team. And all the income, thousands that come in terms of those activity cards. And then there's Caroline over there, and she is the lead for all the horses. The ones you see walking today, we have about 100 people on their horses, and they put quite a lot of into the park. And then there's myself, and then in fact, Nikki at the bottom over there, and Gordon are part of that. So we're 7 members. We put in about 350 hours into this 10 minutes. We believe we represent about 20,000 users. We know these people. We talk to them every day. Amongst us, we've been in business for 200 years. We've managed thousands of people, big budgets. Our budgets have been cut. We know about money. We know about getting these things done. Most of our meetings have been done in the park. And Kingsley will tell you the coffee that you make from that water, that stream, tastes really good. That's where we like to be. Actually, in the park, those people. All right, so we're going to talk about what is required. We're thinking about 100 million rand. Is that crazy? People, this land over here is worth 5 billion rand. We want 0.25% of that value to unlock its value, fix its fauna. And we do believe we've got 200,000 unemployed people in the city who're struggling. We don't have money. We've got tight finances. If we don't use this land properly, somebody else is going to come knocking on the door, and we have that responsibility, and we believe we have a way forward. On the bottom over there, that is Tuamo's hiking group people. They're young professionals, and for the townships, they have said, look, we're too busy to come and sit with your committees, but we have tried to touch side, talk to them in the mountain to try and get a full input. Next slide, please. Wendy, next slide. Okay, so we believe that we've got 3 tranches. We've got short term, medium term, and longer term. And in fact, Therma Corsten, who's the lady who's the great environmentalist? She went to COP26 and he said, guys, blah, blah, blah. Talk, talk, talk. Time for talk is open. Let's have some action. So we say in the short term, that is listers. Can we open it now? On terms of aliens and road fixes, and a tough question, that helicopter that flew past, that cost 30,000 rand that flight. With 30,000, I could fix the road and the emergency guys could drive up our road to that place. That's the tough reality. In the medium term, we are saying is the picnic areas we want to create as a hub. We want to create arenas for cultural people to do that. Number 3, partner with volunteers, Chrysalis City, our neighbors. Our development plan should be integrated with those. And prepare the lower Tokai for when the trees eventually come down. On the right-hand side, Tokai Manor House, we believe we need 80 million rand to unlock the value of the place in terms of a boutique hotel. Not our money, but we'll talk about that in terms of partnerships. We want to link Tokai to the rest of the peninsula. This is not an isolated plot. Linking to Silver Mine, linking to the city, linking to Porter School, we've got a wonderful peninsula. Next slide, please. So we have got all these sections, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, short term, medium term, and long term. And for each of those, we have a plan, we have a costings, and we have a timeline. But I can't do that in 10 minutes. So the next slide, please. So we've just taken one of those. And that is just the manor and the arboretum in the long term. So it's a sample of 1 of 12 sections where we believe that the manor house can be developed and unlocked as part of a hotel that needs serious money, serious professionalism. We believe arenas, we can create community events, not easy to manage with toilet blocks and parkings, but centres for communities to come and hire the place. Next slide. The resources to do that, the good news is that we think we can get funding for 2/3 of that. The example I used for you, we talk about it just now, National Sea Rescue. They are 100% funded by donations, 100 million rand a year. And I personally put money into that. And there's some big lessons from them. I think SANParks, I put it to you, world-class in science, but I believe in terms of contracting, project management, hospitality, and operational excellence, we have big gaps. National Parks was invited to Cape Town in 1998 to bring your professionalism, your expertise, and your resources to this park. Please, sir, come and join us. We want that expertise that has developed the Kruger Park or the players of Natal to unlock all this value. We don't believe, we have the operational budget to do all this planting. Up on the mountain this afternoon, in the next 24 hours, there'll be another 10 tons of aliens will grow tonight. We need 2 to 3 million just to fix the backlog of roads that are eroded or aliens that are growing. And we believe for the people of Cape Town to get this partnership, we've got to sort out some of the arrears, neglected buildings and maintenance operating. We know it's tough times with COVID. What we would look to you is to say is, when the tourists are back and the income goes back again, please, can we first fix this part before funds go else? Because when they ask to do partnership on various items, when we find that there is lack of what we would perceive to be of maintenance. We do see your examples like Kruger Station, the Kruger Park. We've done a great job in partnering with business, but yet we go to Longabot, where for 25 years hasn't been a development of a hotel there. So within the portfolio, we see some good track record and some weak track record, and we hope together with the likes of Tokai Manor, we can structure something. That summary over there is the money. It's all available in more detail. Next, please. So we say, together we can fix it. And to walk through those slides, the top left, we started on that process. You see the hikers on the left-hand side. Those are from our friends Take Back Table Mountain. They would not come here. They said, this is blah, blah, blah. We work in the mountains. We're tired of discussing issues. We've been through this 3 cycles in Cape Town before. The bottom left. So Dion has got a fully sponsored free bucky over there. There's a guy in the back there with his broken collarbone. Because that road is so bad, the ambulance won't go to him. So he has to use his sponsored vehicle to go on that road to bring the guys down. Top right-hand side. That is a voluntary policeman trying to help us. That road's been closed and taped off for 18 months. The right-hand side, that is city that we connect with. The bottom right-hand side, that lady is just living the moment. Lastly, or second lastly, okay, in the middle, that is us. We have a community coffee shop where we use crowdfunding to pay for those planks. And we have Nikki, who also helps us with those planks. We are SANParks, could we just have some planks? We are the labor, we'll put them in. For the last month, we said we've got no money to buy you planks to fix that. We need to get that partnership right. Then I close off at the bottom. That could be my grandson, it's not. He's walking into the bush over there. He has no cell phone. Wonderful. He's going off into the bush. Should I be happy or should I be nervous? I'd like to be happy because that's the culture he's feeling it. Nikki would tell you, if I told you in one of our recent sweeps through the lower park, that red spot, we find condoms and blankets hiding in the bushes. We get nervous. We need to make that Fynbos family-friendly, secure, safety, and patrol. So the community can love it. And we believe fundamentally we have to design a facility and an operation which people will enjoy. And through that enjoyment and appreciation, and I finish off where these guys are walking in Silvermine over the hill. We believe Silvermine Dam area is an example of good conservation, shaded picnic areas, the right concentration of people. There are enough people to make it safe there today, but you can walk up onto the hills if you want a bit of isolation. So we believe Silvermine Dam area, if you don't know it, please go and visit that even today. It's a working example of a nice balance of conservation, family outings, and paintballs and cycling. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think that was a very clear business case and proposal. I like the fact that what you're proposing is backed up by numbers and data. And it looked like most of it is doable. Obviously, we just need to get to the how and when and the timeline and then commit who's doing what. So I think it's something that we can look into internally and see how we take it forward. Thank you very much. I don't have any other question.
Yes. Thank you very much, Steve. I think one of the things about this area of work that we need is really to get things done. And when I look at the costing here, even just the initial cost, it's not a lot of is needed to get things going. And I think what I would like to request perhaps is that we look at these proposals, especially as you just integrate, later on. But this is stuff that needs to go directly to park management and looking at ways of how to realize these things. These are about just ensuring good management of this section of the park and creating opportunities for that will increase access, but also will increase revenue for this section of the park, which can then be reinvested into making this, a place that is really functional. So I think, I don't have questions, and I think there is a lot of detail that we need to discuss internally with the park around how to facilitate some of the things that are loading within this presentation. Thanks.
Okay, so it's safety. So I just want to give a quick caveat. I see a question. Quick caveat on Nikki's behalf is that the convener from her team is unfortunately not able to be with us today because he is isolating family members who are COVID positive. And unfortunately, we weren't able to arrange for him to present remotely either. And so as of about 10 minutes before the start of the meeting, Nikki agreed to do his presentation for him because she's been part of the safety group. So thank you very much for that, Nikki.
I am very much on the back foot here, so please do bear with me. The presentation was put together by Andre van Schalkwyk, who has something like 16 or 17 years of experience in safety in this park as Table Mountain Watch, and I cannot possibly begin to do justice to the depth of his knowledge. So I'm going to speak in very broad brushstrokes off his slides. I haven't seen his final presentation, so please just bear with me accordingly. Wendy, can I have the first slide, please? So this group comprised of, it was a small group: Ed Bain, who is Tokai Crime Watch; Diane Graythorne, who is Kirstenhof Crime Watch; Michelle Toy, who is Kirstenhof Crime Watch; Peter Mayer, who is Kirstenhof Crime Watch; myself, Malcolm Smith, who is Kirstenhof Crime Watch; and Andre van Schalkwyk, who is Table Mountain Watch. One of the things that is very apparent to us, given the great makeup of this group, there was a focus on Lower Tokai, and one of the things that struck us very early on was that the visibility provided by the plantations and the high user numbers is what ensures the safety in that area. And the concern is that if you take that away, you will see an increase in crime in that area. We know exactly what happened in 2016. Francisco was dragged from the edge of the plantation 3 meters into the flames. Nobody saw, nobody heard. And this community has never recovered from that experience. And that is the memory that informs a lot of, I think, what this presentation probably includes. So the objectives really revolve around working together. It's very much a partnership model. You cannot get safety in this park right unless everybody works together. You've got to bring in SAPs, law enforcement, neighborhood watchers, voluntary groups, voluntary organizations, whether it's Parkscape, Tokai, MTB, Friends of Tokai Park, whoever it happens to be, to ensure safer user environments in the Tokai-Cecilia areas. And we have to acknowledge that this is an open access park. Can't keep people out. And a lot of people use the park as a means of ingress and egress between suburbs. And that's a simple reality. And we have to acknowledge the urban realities that we have disadvantaged communities, poor communities, and people are desperate. COVID has made things more desperate. We need to develop sustainable strategies. We need to work with partnerships. We need to use technology and adopt measures which suit specific risks in specific areas and adapt it to specific terrains, and to retain and ensure visibility in all areas. And then again, as I had said, we can use this model in this area for the larger park. So the actions are about leveraging existing and virtual communication centers for incident reportings, ensuring multiple emergency access routes are maintained and accessible. As Stephen has spoken to, we've got a problem with emergency access in Upper Tokai and in Lower Tokai, and it risks being the case in Cecilia going forward. The options to use fixed and mobile panic buttons are one means of addressing user needs. Cameras, and I don't even know what IoT, Internet of Things technology, there you go. I don't know what it is, but you can tell me about it if you know about it. The formalization of car guards, which is something that Stephen has raised on multiple occasions. Empowering communities so that we can work with you. And crime prevention through environmental design. Not a clue what that is, but Andre would have been able to tell you. Again, partnership with security providers. It's something that Parkscape does. We partner with Premier, ADT, and Mountain Men. We work with the honorary rangers. So there's an opportunity to build on a model like that. Increase high visibility patrols by user groups and honorary rangers. Again, it's something that we already do and others can be doing as well. There's a call for additional SANParks visibility patrols. And an opportunity, there needs to be an opportunity to report incidents centrally and to make these available to partners so that we all know what's going on in our park. We have found that high side views and observation posts play a fundamental role in safety. The appropriate use of drones, but we can't get people into areas drones can do a really good job. Lower Tokai is a case in point. We can't get cameras to see into the fynbos. Drones can see. Visibility and high user numbers, as I said up front, can secure the safety of Tokai-Cecilia. If you reduce the recreational value of those areas, those user numbers will go down. We cannot do the job that we're currently doing. So the actions, Lower Tokai, the request is to retain and ensure visibility in Lower Tokai with high canopy trees, wider paths through fynbos areas, limit plant height, increase viewing decks, provide horse and emergency tracks so that we can make use of horse riders. Horse riders are higher up, horses are sensitive, they'll pick up on trouble very quickly. High mounted mobile PTZ cameras, drones, and again, high visibility patrols. Middle Tokai, the suggestion is to increase the traffic and open to other users, such as to develop additional eyes and ears capabilities. Upper Tokai, user group solutions in partnership with providers, high visibility patrollers, high site viewers, observation posts. Tokai MTB have been running safety and security ops up in Tokai for the past few years, and they have gone crime-free and up at the crime, I think, for well over a period of a year. Cecilia Forest, the proposals are, we have formalized car guards, which I think you already have in Cecilia Gordon. Vendors, because vendors will take responsibility for their own areas and they will ensure safety and security. Cameras, Internet of Things, hidden detection technology. Principles, design for safety, start small, regain the trust of the people who use the park, leverage of what exists, adapt to the terrain, plan, do, check, and act. Thank you.
So much, Nikki. A very impressive job for somebody on your toes there. Any questions?
Thanks for standing in for this important presentation. I think we all agree that one of the objectives which I've seen there says we need to work together. With all the other streams, if we start seeing, if we fail on this one, we can't enjoy the other streams. So it's an important one. But I think for me, without putting pressure on you, but just to understand that the level of crime in the society versus in the mountain, what is the ratio there? I may have the answer, but I'm just thinking, because whatever happens in the mountains, it's a reflection of society, I would think. And that's what it tells you, what is the ratio, where the most crime incidents or activities taking place. If you compare in the mountain.
So we don't have stats and we don't get given stats. So to answer that kind of question is well nigh impossible because SAPS will not give us stats. So, what I would say to you is that we see crime everywhere. And the crime that we see in the park is by and large opportunistic. And it increases in the tourist season because opportunity increases in the tourist season. I think what we've seen during this COVID period because of the impact of lockdown is a reduction in crime. But if you look at 2020, I think it was 2018, the levels of crime in this park were profound. And I think what you have to balance that against property is the fact that we come back to that concept of temple and sanctuary and respite. When people come into the park and they come into the mountain, they want to be safe because they're escaping the urban reality and the fact that, you can't walk down the street without checking over your shoulder. You want to be able to escape that, come into the park, feel safe, be safe, and unwind. You can't unwind if you are having to look over your shoulder here as well.
So to get one comment says, there's a perimeter crime rate. Breaking into a car, parking on the road, going into the park, which we've got to solve in partnership with the city. Then there's the injury on top of, right in the middle of the park. France and I are trying to sort out some of the comms because people get attacked where there are no comms. Actually, deep in the park, we don't have a high crime rate. On the perimeter, it is too high. And we ask national parks to take ownership of a break-in of a car from someone who's coming to the park, not just say it's not our business. This is 1 ton of where the park comes right into the city to come. One place, right into the city, where we've got to work together. Because, and whether it's city or not, it's got to be done together, otherwise people will see a weakness. And these guys walk around, the opportunists. Where's the soft spot? Where's the soft spot, guys? That's where they go.
Yeah, I mean, the closer you are to urban hubs, the greater your risk. I mean, if we look at Lower Tokai as an example, that section, that block where Francisco was murdered, that's high traffic. It's easy access from Auckland Road, and you just go into those sections and you find all sorts of stuff in those bushes. I think the other thing is that you've got hotspots in the park. You know where your hotspots are. So attention needs to be paid to the hotspots, but that's beyond the conversation of Tokai-Cecilia.
Thank you very much.
About the relationship between sex and law enforcement. We find that they always show responsibility when you land where nobody wants to trade. And I think that is, I mean, I was in American, for instance, in San Diego. And in that particular, they have but only the metro police that ensure the safety of the citizens of the city. But here we have an interference from national government. Seems to operate the operation for safety, but they don't perform their task. I'm sure that the law enforcement needs to become the greater force in the city. It must be discussed. The other point I want to raise is just in relation to the Tokai tribe. Cecilia falls in the area of the jurisdiction of the Tokai tribe. And we have a medicine man that has got a vast knowledge of indigenous plants. How to ensure that we have a cycle, restorative cycle to benefit. I believe that we can develop a partnership with the Tokai tribe and SANParks so that we can ensure that our people will have accessibility to harvest those medicinal plants. It is our intellectual knowledge, and that sometimes we are denied accessibility into the world. I believe we must come to a firm decision that we develop that partnership. Thank you.
So can I make one point on the Francesca murder, Rebecca? In 2001, the warders, the Pollsmoor warders said, our kids are getting free drugs from the gangsters. Please help us. It was a warder's drug addict son who killed him. So the intertwines of the city and these relationships cannot be ignored.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you very much, Kingsley. I think that.
Idea.
Sorry?
Idea.
Idea. I'm so sorry, Kingsley, sorry. Today's the first time that I'm meeting you all and ask and thank you very much. Say that one more time.
Idea.
Idea.
Kai meaning big,
Yes.
Bia meaning cheap.
Idea. Oh, cheap,
Yeah.
yes.
Otherwise, we have.
Okay, Idea, thank you very much, sorry. Just to acknowledge that the second point was in response to the facilities presentation regarding the necessity for access for the Tokai tribe into Cecilia. So thank you very much for that input. And the first one really reiterating the need for partnership and working together and collaboration. It's totally globally acknowledged that safety can only be achieved through collaboration. So thank you very much. Nikki, would you like to make one last comment?
I just want to, if I may call you that. And that is to say that I think that we have an interesting problem in this park because we have SANParks with jurisdiction, we have SAPs with jurisdiction, and we have law enforcement on the edge with no jurisdiction. And that is something that has to be resolved, and that's the whole notion of partnerships.
Thank you very much. And I think also just highlighting the complexity of safety related issues, particularly in an environment where there is this interface between the wilderness and the urban environment. So thank you very much, Nikki. And Lauren, our last but not least, communications, bringing it really all together. Of course, communications being a theme that's run through all of the proposals. Presentation. Thanks, Lauren.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lauren Clayton, the comms manager for February. The co-convener couldn't be here today. Unfortunately, I had other responsibilities. I'll be presenting on behalf of I guess. Okay. So first and foremost, this process will learn more about our stakeholders and complex reporting going forward when we communicate these aspects of the guidance element. So thank you. I'm really it's a really helpful. We also learned a lot from doing this process. So the communications plan paves the way for communications and reputation management for South African National Parks, the Tokai-Cecilia Management Framework situated within Table Mountain National Park. So this plan basically highlights an integrated communications approach that we need to take forward. Like I said, it combines internal communications with staff and also supports external stakeholder engagement, monitoring and evaluation in relation to the TCMF. This is also an opportunity to build positive identity for Table Mountain National Park amongst both its internal and external stakeholders to counter invalid and inaccurate narratives about the TCMF while concurrently promoting its achievements. So that is the aim of comms or this comms plan going forward for the Tokai-Cecilia management plan. Anyone can play? So basically, during this process, we have listened to the working groups and also identify the needs of various stakeholders. So this is what's highlighted in this section, and also the needs that has arisen through this. So this framework of proactive, consistent messaging will position SANParks as contributing to the social capital of South Africa through sustainable management of the conservation of biodiversity and cultural heritage, diverse and responsible tourism, and socio-economic transformation, which is the core mandate of SANParks as well. To activate ongoing feedback loops with the TCMF stakeholders, post submissions of the TCMF stakeholders reports and proposals as well. So comms will be assisting with that together with Big Team. It will also enable knowledge staff participation. Enable knowledgeable staff participation while creating a sense of ownership and entrenching a culture of service. Yeah, so this comms plan is also to counteract misconceptions and misrepresentations of SANParks and its activities. Next week. So like I said, during the process, this comms plan also highlights the needs and concerns from various stakeholders. So I'll just take you through a few. There's a longer list in the proposal, which I'm sure you'll have a little later. So the communications by SANParks is not proactive and is seemingly situation dependent. For instance, SANParks is effective in communicating on current fire situations within the park, but ineffective in educational awareness regarding fire safety, which Gordon has mentioned as well. So SANParks communications is not always agile enough as approval for release of statements or various other communication takes too long. There's a perceived lack of transparency by SANParks, as many internal policies and decisions are not published online or in the media. So there's a lack of, people are saying that they cannot access information that they would like. It could be on our website or social media, for example. Okay. It was also identified that there's a lack of trust between the park and the stakeholders, who often question the expertise of park officials. Okay. User groups have a general lack of knowledge regarding the TCMF. This is just what I'm taking out of the convenience as well. More information needs to be shared through electronic communications, online campaigns, signage, media statements, video footage, etc., which we'll touch on later. First encounter with the public is also important, and staff need to be trained in customer relations, and these are the needs that were identified as well. The organization is in the fortunate position where, in the main, it receives positive media coverage. It is, however, not immune to highly damaging negative social and mainstream media coverage, which I'm sure we're all aware of regarding that international part. The TCMF faces criticism, 5 minutes, nobody's almost done. The TCMF faces criticism about various issues such as safety and security incidents, fire, lack of maintenance, leading to the public questioning the overall competence of the management of Table Mountain National Park and relationships between the team responsible for the TCMF and user groups requires ongoing attention and the building of trust. Wendy? Okay, come to the last slide, because I like to keep it short and sweet. So with all that's been taken into account, this proposal also identified mediums as to how we can better communication with the public and our stakeholders. So these are various mediums that we will look into and make use of. I heard the word quick wins, I think was from you, Stephen, our last meeting. So that is something that we can do and work on as of now. Regarding fire safety, seeing that we are on fire safety, water safety and security issues of the park. So the various mediums that we will be using is obviously media and public relations, internal communications, marketing and promotional support, public participation processes, public information and education campaigns. I know that is quite big right now and actually what we want to see forward. So quick wins, and I think this is also a good opportunity for SANParks experts and you guys to come together so that you can see where the lack is in terms of information that's been shared. So welcome. Thanks for working.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I meant to say at the beginning that being nervous when you present is actually a sign of respect.
Yeah.
It's a sign that you really care about the way that people experience your input. So thank you so much for your presentation. And I think, as you said, short and sweet. We do have a question here. I can start here.
Thanks. I mean, I appreciate, the work again that has been done here. This is a view, and maybe I should say it's a personal view that I'm sharing. I think no. I think if we see, national parks as complex social ecological systems, and also see the role of communication not to manage perceptions, but rather in good sense.
When do you choose love?
Are we good? Yeah. So that I think the role of communication is to actually share, with the public, about what the park represents, rather than to manage an image. I believe that, to me, if we can aim for that at the highest level with regards to communication, and I think it goes to the points that Gordon raised, for instance, about, awareness, education, communication, about various things that we are doing, about culture, about fire management, about, people and opportunities for people to actually enjoy the park, on the biodiversity and what it represents and what it means. I think we can achieve so much, and actually participate together in anything about what this is. For instance, I've been coming to Table Mountain for a long time, but I've learned so much about Table Mountain today. And it was not an information or an awareness session. It is a meeting, but every time you come, you're learning something new. And I think that we need to look at how do we create those platforms for learning together, and also platforms also for co-production of knowledge, because it's not actually like, I mean, SANParks singular, I don't want to say responsibility, but SANParks is not the only authority and only owner of knowledge and information about this mountain. You know, SANParks contributes to that and manages some of it, but there's a lot of other people that are knowledgeable about what is going on in this place. And I mean, I was learning a lot, chatting to Kingsley earlier about, you know, like the indigenous communities and the traditional, activities and festivities, you know, that, you know, they do around this place. And I think that our communication, Lauren, and I'm putting a lot of burden on you in that regard, should actually be looking at how do we create that core learning environment with all of the stakeholders and all of the people and users of table, so that anyone who comes here, whether like, I mean, they are local or international, they come and leave this place enriched because there's so much they are learning every time they come and visit.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, depends, Lauren, mine as well is not the question, but to say, communication, the way we do it at a national level, it seems as if it won't work here. You have to design a local sort of concept for this place, because out of all the seven teams or the seven groups, all the members there mentioned some communication or some learning or some teaching. So I think it's very key that we adopt that, we make sure that we do it effectively. Let's start with this process as well. If we can communicate this process effectively, I think we can achieve something, because we have to test it with something you know. And it may happen that this communication must not or sit with only SANParks. Maybe this type of communication needs to sit with the public and SANParks. So we have to do things which we have never done before. Otherwise, we'll come back and complain about the processes and the red tape of SANParks in terms of approvals and statements and all. So I'm thinking, let's design something for this place, and let's design something which can work locally. Thank you.
Sorry, I know one more thing. Down here in the feed.
Just the communication. It's a lack of resources here. And I want to give it possible. Between the SANParks and the city to work out. But at least they supply, like Stellenbosch City, District Council has got free Wi-Fi for people in the city. And I think that the city must consider that at least we must free Wi-Fi to engage. Because at the moment it costs money. And what they do, you have to pay. So there's a lack of that. Just on the training of the points of entrance onto the SANParks syndicates, I believe that there needs to be a much more sensitivity of educating the staff of SANParks to be not so restricted and not understanding the diversity in South Africa. Is that we find from an indigenous point of view that they always are given preference to the Caucasians and not to the indigenous people. To take out jurisdiction. That needs to be addressed. Then, just an idea that comes up. How can SANParks, it's a serious forest, open up the space, become an open classroom for all these things? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. I think that there's a really important point to be made there about communications and who you're trying to reach and how you reach them. And I know that those are some of the things that Lauren will be grappling with and her team will be grappling with as well. I think really important acknowledgement here to say communications from Table Mountain National Park is very different from the communication strategies that can be applied in parks that are not in quite such a close interface with their communities, particularly where the communities are very, very active and feel such a deep investment and love and connection, spiritual and otherwise, with the park. So thank you very much for that. Stephen, I see you have a hand. Wendy, I think we're going to go into a Q&A session with our guests. Guests, be ready for questions are now going to be coming your way. I do ask, I see you, Stephen, I do ask that we don't try and deal with the big burning issues, the ones that we raised this morning. We did agree we're not going to be able to give answers on those. So I'm going to ask that the conversation now relates to the presentations that we've seen. Let's have some conversation as a group about the presentation. Yes, Wendy?
Thanks, Emma. Just wanted to say that those who are watching from online, we're very interested in your questions also. Please send them to the TCMF email address. And although there are so many stakeholders, we may not get around to every question. It also gives us record of those you might have that we can respond to later.
Great. So thank you very much. So those who are not with us but are online, sending emails to tcmf@sanparks.org. If we're not able to answer those questions during the session today, we certainly will incorporate them into the process, the overall process, and we will make sure that everybody receives some kind of response. Stephen.
Yes. Lauren, when I go home this afternoon, 100 people want to know what happened today. Do we have an agreed communication out? It's already on.
Lauren says that there has been a media statement which has been released. I don't know, perhaps you can, if anybody would like to hear a little bit more about the content of that before they leave, maybe they can come and chat to you, Lauren. Is that all right? Great.
Can I?
Yes, please.
I mean, if we look also in relation to the point that Property made earlier about the sort of collective responsibility for communicating and sharing about this. I mean, with social media, like that many people have access to, we would encourage actually that you share about, today, because whereas Lauren and other communications people perhaps are bound by SANParks policies, your participants in a much broader, process that is not just, controlled and bound by SANParks policies. And we want to encourage sharing, in that respect. You need to be able, to speak freely and share what you think, that to me, a much more robust, broader communication, encourages us also to be on top of our game. We don't want to just be restrictive and secretive. We are an open society. We need to be transparent. We're also a public institution, and we are coming to terms with the fact that we need to be much more open than we have previously been. We need to be much more transparent. We need to be much more engaged. And so I think those are things that we want to emphasize as principles that must underpin how we relate with the users of Table Mountain, with the stakeholders around Table Mountain, and with the broader, including the broader South Africa. There's a lot of learning that will come, people knowing about what is happening, this robust engagement. What are opportunities for other parks to learn from this? We've got Garden Route, which is an urban national park. just like Cape Mountain, we've got Kruger, which has got a huge peri-urban population of more than 2 million people who want to engage robustly. And I think that we should not miss the opportunity to share broadly about our experience here. So your reflections, even in local newspapers, in other media platforms, are things that we welcome, because those are things that we will learn from. We don't want you to only speak out when there is a huge crisis or when there's a huge problem. We want you to be able to speak out about various things that help to educate the general public about how we are working together, even.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Are there any more questions for our guests or visitors? I'd like to know how you feel about the complex process that sort of lies ahead, not only for the local SANParks team in terms of preparing an integrated draft plan, but for you, engaging with some quite sort of difficult tensions between needs. How are you feeling about that process? Are you ready for it? Give that back to the top.
I think that putting me on hold.
Sorry.
Yeah. Perhaps maybe let me start by maybe appreciating the great work which all the groups have done. It's been a lengthy process where everybody really dedicated a number of hours and time, and that's really appreciated, because it's really for the better good of everyone. And I want to appreciate also your commitment and your love for this park. And I think it's very important, because we received this park from the previous generation, and we are the custodians and the current generation to make sure that the future generation doesn't ask us what happened under our watch. And I think you actively fulfill that goal very much well. I would like to applaud you for that. We obviously received your work, which is in written form, and we undertake to read it and really process it. Obviously, there are divergent views in which we need to. I think what I want to indicate, and also in answering your question, is that in this particular process, there's not going to be a winner takes it all, because they're quite divergent views. And we must also appreciate that we must experience a little bit of discomfort in order to provide a little bit of comfort to the person that is next to you. And I think if we can have that common goal, and I think this process will work very well. So it's something that I would really want to encourage, that there must be some form of a compromise there and there. Obviously, we don't want to compromise the goals and the objective that we are trying to achieve, but in a manner in which how we actually get there. I want us to encourage all of us to continue to do the good work and preserve this particular part by the city, the responsible tourism, in particular the issues of crime. Remember, the bad news hits headlines because it serves more than the good news. And Table Mountain is one of the 7 wonders of the world. And we don't want bad publicity. Not because we don't want that. We want the local community to enjoy what you happen to see every day for the moment that they come into the park. And that's why that's very, very important. Now, I think many of the things that you've actually proposed are doable. And it's true that some parks may not be able to do it alone. And I think that's the fact that we need to put into the table. We do have limitations in many different ways. One way, because we have government entity, and you know the number of restrictions that the government has. It's just, I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate that SANParks is a public entity which was created for the public good, which mainly to manage protected areas. And you know that we're managing just not only national park, but Table Mountain, but 20 marine protected areas, including 20 national park, including about 10 marine protected areas. So we have been hit really hard because of COVID, and we as an organization lost over 2 billion in revenue, which really affected in how we manage the organization, in particular conservation areas. We have, as a management team, worked very hard to protect the jobs. And as you know, we employ just over 6,000 employees, both permanent as well as temporary, and want to continue to do so. We rely heavily on tourism revenue, which means people who come to the park and pay conservation fee and other things. And government really give us about 20%, even though the public good mandate cost us even more than that. So many of the initiatives which we seem to welcome, which we are proposing, we just need to find a way of and a mechanism in which we work together to make them happen. And that's why a concept of PPP, which is public-private partnership, is very key. And I've seen some very good ideas that you actually are proposing. And I think this is all about co-management. And when we talk about co-management, we then say, how do we share responsibilities? And sharing responsibilities and co-leading in these particular areas is that there's a shared vision, then we agree how we get there, and who takes which responsibility and how they get funded. If we can achieve that, I think it will solve about 90% of our problems. So we might not be able to commit to everything that you've written here because you still have to read it and process it. But what we do commit to is to work together in getting to these other things. So we've received a lot of feedback and input, including many directions where you've actually pointed us to working with the city, speaking to the deputy mayor and as well as the mayor of the fire. There's very good information that can through history, the issues of safety, the well-being of people, the well-being of biodiversity. I mean, the use of drone, the use of Internet of Things, there's so much vast information. So, and we believe that you are the key anchors to make sure that those things happen. You have our support. I mean, you spoke about the group, and we like those ideas because we are saying, can we create this and SANParks and support it? And I don't think there can be anything wrong for SANParks to support something that is good. So I might have went beyond answering your question, but I think in a nutshell, we just want to, I mean, we're dedicated to come down this weekend. My wife was asking, why do you have to work on the weekend? but we are keen to spend this particular weekend to show our support of this process, and would like you to give us the same commitment so that we can work.
Thank you very much. I think, I mean, in response to your question, I think I feel both nervous and hopeful. Nervous because, you know, I think that we are on the verge of something really big, you know, and I think something original and groundbreaking. But I'm hopeful because I sense a lot of commitment from, you know, all of the working groups and the stakeholders in this process. And I think it's important that going forward, we really, even as we're about to process, you know, like, I mean, thoroughly everything that you've shared, including the 420 pages, that I think we commit ourselves to action. You know, I mean, it's nice to talk, but we really need to, what makes a difference is really action. We need to also agree to take it, one step at a time, or to take it in bite sizes. And I think the infrastructure, team gave us very clear, bite sizes, including both in terms of time and cost. And I think where that is possible, it's not always possible in each and every area. Where that is possible, I think it's good to be able to reflect on those short, medium, long-term goals and how we can get there. I think as soon as we conclude this process, but maybe even before, there are some things that we can and should do, but I think we should start soon rather than, tomorrow, because I think the longer, some of the things you put out, the longer they fade, and then it becomes very difficult to really get started. There's things that we need to get done, and to get done soon. I think we also need, my feeling of this process is that we also need to look beyond the review. To how do we walk together and work together, in a way that gives expression to the broader, vision of Table Mountain National Park as an urban national park. And I think we also need to ensure that we anchor everything in co-production and co-learning, co-production of knowledge about the park and learning together, because I find that we would limit ourselves if we would think that the expertise can only rest in SANParks. It's not possible. We don't have the resources to be able to do everything, learn everything, produce everything. That is the complex nature of the park that we're managing, that requires that we need to appreciate that there are many other people who are reservoirs, or who have reservoirs of knowledge and wisdom about how we can actually manage and share this landscape that we are managing. And then I think one of the things that I want to mention is that we want you to keep us accountable. And that's a difficult thing to say, because we know that it's not an easy thing, but as a public institution, we must be held accountable. Held accountable for the commitments that we make when we finish this process, the review of this, and in the process that is going to be outlined by Wendy. I know that we'll come back and again engage on the final product of the work that you have done. When we make commitments, we must be held accountable. The park must be held accountable. The region must be held accountable. The national office must be held accountable for commitments that we make. Otherwise, we will come and say nice things here, leave, and come back, a year later, say nice things and go away. There must be accountability, and there must be a way of showing results for the things that we are talking about. Otherwise, all of these man hours that we put in here will come to nothing. I think we must also think about how do we mainstream the things that we've identified for, the Cecilia Tokai framework to the park management plan into the management of Table Mountain National Park as a whole, so that it's not just about, a portion of the mountain, but rather about the culture of how we are doing things, in the whole of Table Mountain. And I think we will also be reflecting about how do we do that for other national parks, because I think when we're reflecting on lessons from this process, we need to think about how do we do that? How do we make sure that we create platforms and spaces for robust engagement across, our national parks with our stakeholders, because I think there's a lot of value, that comes from that we don't really appreciate if we, sort of think that we know it all, we can do it all, and basically